Nothing like some classic ASMR to fall asleep to. This was me whispering sweet nothings to my girlfriend last night. Earlier this year, I moved into a new place. It's a cheap one-bedroom apartment that's around 400 square feet. And although it's not much to look at from the outside, the inside is actually pretty nice. And the landlord even paid for a deep clean before I moved in. But after the first night, I started to notice some things that didn't make any sense. Like there was a strong chemical smell coming from the walls in random drafts no matter what the temperature was set to. And there were other little things like missing outlet covers and random screws in the wall. Little things that I just kind of shrugged off because again, it's a cheap place. Then I started hearing noises. At first, I thought it was the neighbors, normal apartment stuff. But then I heard scratching in the walls, specifically right above my bed. So naturally, I get up on my bed and start listening closer, and that's when I heard it again. Clear as day. Someone or something scratching away in the walls right above me. Now, if you've ever tried to listen to noises in your walls, you'll know how hard it is to pinpoint exactly where it's coming from. So I spent an hour going around the room with my ear to different walls, and it always seemed to be right above my head no matter where I went. And that's when I noticed the air vent. The air vent didn't have a filter, and it looked like it had been cleaned in years. So I took off the cover and looked inside, and I could see all kinds of dust, dirt, and a few bugs. But once I got the flashlight out, I saw that there was also what looked like teeth marks all over the edges, so I did what anyone would do. I turned the light off and listened intently, and I could hear it again. Small scratching sounds right above me. Now, I live alone, and I've lived alone for several years now. I do have any pets, and I certainly would have let any bug live in my house. So I knew that those teeth marks had to be from something else. But there was no way I was going to try to look inside that air vent, so I put the cover back on and decided that I'd worry about it another day. Well, that night, I couldn't sleep because I kept hearing that scratching. I started to panic, thinking that maybe whatever that was would attack me in the middle of the night. So of course I called my mom and I woke her up, and I told her that I think I found a dead body in the walls and asked her what I should do. And she said the most logical thing. She said, "Why don't you check?" So being that my mom is a lot more level-headed than I am, I went back to listening to the walls, and I still heard that scratching sound right above me. So I got back on the bed and I put my ear right next to the air vent. And that S when I heard it say, "Hello, yeah." Somebody was in the walls, and they were trying to talk to me. I immediately started screaming, and my mom on the other end of the phone started screaming. I ran out of the room and into the kitchen, and that S where I decided to stay for the rest of the night. In the morning after, of course, not getting any sleep, I called my landlord and I told him that we needed to figure out how to open up the walls to check for whatever was in there. He said he'd send someone by later in the day to take a look. So I spent the day watching YouTube videos about how to open up drywall, just in case I had to show the guy where to cut. Well, the guy showed up and I explained the situation to him. I didn't go into the whole story about how I heard a voice and all that because I didn't want to seem crazy. So I just told him that I thought that there might be some insulation or something in the walls blocking the airflow, and I wanted it checked out. Thankfully, he didn't think that I was weird and he agreed to take a look. So he grabbed his tools and went into the bedroom. While he was in there, I could hear him talking to himself and making little noises like, "Interesting," and "Oh yeah, that's weird." And I could also hear him moving around the room and grabbing stuff. Then he came out of the room with a big smile on his face and he told me that he found something really cool. He said that behind the air vent was a hidden crawl space. Apparently, there was a door on the other side of the apartment that led into it, but that door had been sealed shut with drywall. He said that it was probably there for storage, or maybe it was for access to the old radiator system. And when he opened up the vent, he noticed that someone had made little holes for air to escape. And then when he stuck his head in there, he could hear me scratching on the other side. He brought out a flashlight and he shined it in there and he said that there was definitely someone in there and they were awake. He asked if I wanted him to call the police, but I said no because I didn't want everyone showing up and finding out what had happened. I mean, I wasn't sure what was going on myself, let alone explain it to the cops. So I told him to grab his phone and shine it in there so I could see what was going on. And that's when he found the most peculiar thing yet. 2 eyes staring directly at him. Whoever was in that crawl space had used a piece of paper towel to wipe down the condensation on the window and was now looking directly at him through it. He ended up cutting a bigger hole in the drywall so that he could see better, and that S when he saw them sleeping. They were laying on their side with a blanket over themselves, which made them look kind of like a burrito. But he could tell that they were either completely naked or that they had very, very thin clothes on. But he also noticed that there was a pile of clothes next to them and a backpack full of what looked like important documents. So he said, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need some help?" But they just stared at him with these wide eyes and didn't say anything. So he continued asking questions, but he didn't get any response. At this point, he started feeling a little uncomfortable, so he put his phone down and reached for the door to leave. But before he could, they spoke up and they said, "What are you doing here?" And that S when he turned back around and saw that they had crawled over to the hole in the drywall and were looking at him. They were still blurry because of the condensation, but he could tell that they were young, maybe in their early 20s, and that they were male. But he could also tell that they were very skinny and dirty, and their hair and facial hair were they looked like they hadn't bathed in weeks. My landlord ended up calling the police while I hid in the kitchen, and they ended up arresting that guy. But here's the thing, he didn't come out of the crawl space. Instead, they cut another hole in the closet and brought him out in handcuffs and everything. So that means that there was another entrance to that crawl space somewhere in that apartment. But to this day, nobody has found it, and it's still one of the biggest mysteries in my life. Now, as for the guy that was living in there, his name was James, and according to the police, he had warrants out for his arrest for burglary and trespassing, and apparently, he'd been staying in that crawl space for months. How he got in there is still unknown, but somehow he had made a home for himself under my apartment. He had a mattress, although it was covered in what looked like blood, along with a dresser, a lamp, some chairs, a TV, and a few other things. He also had a bunch of food wrappers on the floor and a few handwritten notes. He must have written them at some point during his stay, because my landlord said that they were recent. But I noticed that none of them had any dates on them. They were just things like, don't trust anyone, and if you hear a knock, run away. It was weird and creepy, and I wish that I knew more about what was going on in that crawl space. Now, since then, I've had the whole place cleaned out, including having a professional come in and decontaminate the air ducts. But I still can't help but wonder what that guy was doing hiding in my walls and why he left those weird messages behind. Anyways, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.